This episode of the podcast has been brought to you by Sweet Cheetah Publicity. Sweet Cheetah is an inclusive, socially conscious PR collective that puts their money where their mouth is. They have a current roster of bands that reads like a greatest hits anthology. Brainiac, Catholic School, Jawbox, The New Amsterdams, Oceans in the Sky. I mean, the list goes on and on. They also do PR for record labels such as A La Carte, Arctic Rodeo, Steadfast, Rad Girlfriend, and so many more. How do they pay it forward? How do they put their money where their mouth is? By generating thousands of dollars in annual charitable donations to the likes of Women in Vinyl, Coalition of Communities of Color, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and many, many more. The man has the receipts. I've seen them. It is real. The artists, labels, and podcasts Sweet Cheetah works with are curated with an eye on working primarily with friends. You could find Sweet Cheetah on all of the social media platforms, be it Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Just look for Sweet Cheetah PR and they will be there. He's been Tim, I've been Peter, and Sweet Cheetah has been beautiful. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I'm your host, Peter, and I am still here. Tonight on the show, I have Matt Spatial of Now After Never. Now After Never is a Darkwave duo that has recently released two singles, Fixation Fantasy and Sick Fix, both of which poised to capture the imaginations of dark music fans everywhere. They have inspirations ranging from My Bloody Valentine, The Cure, Sonic Youth, and Nine Inch Nails, Jane's Addiction, and a cadre of excellent 90s groups that did sort of help cement an entire movement. You take all of that, you distill it down, and that gives you sort of an idea of what we're up against here. This is an incredible two-song assault. I cannot wait to hear the rest of this EP that is forthcoming. They are also planning on doing live dates, probably in 2024. So we are catching Now After Never right at the beginning of what I believe is going to be a very long and fruitful career. Get a little business out of the way. If you like what you're hearing, please like, rate, subscribe, review, share my stuff. You know the drill. Thanks for listening. On with the show. So Matt and I got into everything. We got into politics. We got into his past in recording. What he'd gone to school for initially was recording. We really dig deep into his history, precursor to this project. I hope you enjoy listening to our conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. In the coming weeks, I'm going to be sort of publishing everything that I have left in the library, as it were. I'm only going to be doing a few more interviews before my summer break, which, yes, the podcast does get a summer break too. We do 2 breaks a year on this show. I do my summer break and I do my winter break. Everybody deserves a little break, right? Now, my break's not going to be that long this time around for the summer. Usually I take about 3 weeks. I'm only going to take 2 this year. Whereas winter break, I'm going to be gone for a little while. Not sure how long yet, but depending upon where I end up, both living situation-wise and vocation-wise, I could take up to 2 months. I hope that's not the case. If that does happen, I will have episodes left in the magazine ready to rattle off week by week, so you have something to listen to while I'm gone. It's not going to be a break from listening. It's just going to be a break from interviews. So if you're a band, try and get in touch with me now, because as it looks, I'm going to be backed up for a little while. So, without further ado, I give to you Matt Spatial, Now After Never, and the single Fixation Fantasy, on the book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. Is that a Gretsch I see behind you?
It is, yeah. So I've
Thunderbird.
got so here's a Les Paul bass, Gretsch Duo Jet, Gibson Thunderbird,
Yep.
Fender P bass, and Fender Jaguar. Well, so that P bass was actually the very first one that my very first bass ever. And like you, I don't consider myself a guitar player. I'm more so a bassist that can play enough guitar to, get by or whatever, in the studio when I have some time to, to hone in on it.
Yeah.
And write some parts that, kind of fit or whatever. But, yeah, definitely, I don't consider myself a guitar player, but yeah, that P bass was the first bass I ever got. And that was like and I was a drummer before that, but, I picked up that P bass. And then when I really started, realize okay, I'm kind of done with drums and I want to just be a bass player from now on. That's when I got the Thunderbird. And being a huge Simon Gallup fan.
Me too.
Yeah. I was like, if they're good enough for Simon, they're good enough for me. And yeah. And I love that Thunderbird. It's seen better days. It could use some work at this point, but even God, I mean, it still just sounds so incredible. I mean, it really does. I did some when I was recording. So I recorded everything here in my home studio. So this is like my control room, and I've got a live room over there.
Oh wow.
It's not much bigger than this room, the live room, but yeah. So I was just A-Bing, the two basses with because I had gotten some new gear and I just wanted to really geek out on everything, and so started trying everything out and thought I was going to because I've actually recorded with the P bass a lot because like I said, in over time, the Thunderbird, it's just starting to get a little wonky.
Yeah.
Just the arrows of being like a neck through body and all that stuff. But I was playing something on my P bass, and then I was like, I wanted something. I just knew it wasn't the tone I quite wanted. And as soon as I plugged in the Thunderbird, I'm like, oh, there she is. Instantly, I was like, this is the tone.
It's that neck through.
It is.
I'm telling you, there's something about it that it just the quality of a Gibson neck through in general. It just has a warmer and darker and more stark tone. It's such a contrast of sounds that people who aren't necessarily musicians wouldn't know much about it.
Right.
Other than the fact that I like the way that sounds more than this. And I'm coming at it from that bent. There's just something about it's magical almost. There's an alchemy to it.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree. That was one of the coolest things. So I don't know if we're rolling now and you want to just kind of keep going. Or,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was really exciting. So I went to recording school after my undergrad degree. I went to the recording workshop and did took a 2-month kind of crash course in it. And I had been dying to really start putting, I mean, I had done stuff along the way, but nothing like where I had my own studio and I could really record everything myself. And, finally was able to get, I'm set up here where I have 24 inputs. And I just geeked out on everything. I was trying, when we were doing drums in here, my drummer and I literally was like, all right, we're going to start from square one. We're going to try every mic in every position and against every preamp. And we're just going to, just dial everything in the way we want it to be. And, it was awesome. It was a great experience and just a lot of fun and just hearing the different tones and sounds and knowing that you were doing your due diligence, Yeah. And it's kind of if I had the years of working in a studio where I could have just been well, I know that this preamp's going to sound good. It was my turn to get that experience with the gear that I, was able to acquire. So it was just, it was 2 full days of just dialing in drum sounds, but it was so worth it, and really, really was happy with the results. And you can hear it too. When we were, literally just okay, here's this tom this tom on, I have an Audient preamp. What do I got here? I have a Focusrite, Personas, and an Audient. All of their like 8-channel kind of middle of the range kind of models.
Mhm.
And the difference was really incredible. I mean, I knew that there would be some difference, but I didn't expect there to be as big of a difference as there actually was. And when it came time to do, so when we were dialing everything in, it was like, it just became a no-brainer. Like you could really hear like, man, this, I won't say which one, but this particular preamp is not the best on really anything except for this particular thing, where it like really was like just far and away the best one for that particular instrument. And then all the other ones, you'd kind of be like, it's kind of between these two. And it was fun. I love geeking out on that shit.
Well, the thing about that is, and especially since you had gone to school for recording, when you take into consideration the fact that anything applied and learned out in a non-clinical manner is always where you glean the most results and you have the most memorable learning experiences.
Completely.
You could read it in a book. Great. You learn everything in the field. I don't care if you're a plumber like me or whatever it is. You're going to learn by making mistakes, by fucking up. You learn more from what you fuck up than what you get right.
Absolutely. It's learning by doing, like I've always been like a visual learner, and someone who does much better when I'm actually, like no matter what the thing was, if it was a math problem or whatever, just by actually doing it for myself, and like I just retain everything so much better that way.
Is that kind of like where the meat of these songs come from? Because to me, like I only have the two, but from what I've heard, you could call it darkwave or post-punk or whatever. What I'm hearing is maybe sounds from the past, but you're applying them in a very different way. You're almost approaching them like not a pop song as in like Britney Spears, but pop as in like what let's say the Beatles, the absolute greatest pop group of all time. To me, that's the way you're approaching this. It's pop with very dark sensibilities, like something Trent Reznor would have done, like something The Cure would have done. Not saying, okay, we're going to be this and we're just this. It's like, no, those are just seasonings. So that's kind of the way I'm viewing it anyway. Like you're playing this in the field and that's what you're coming up with.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's not something I don't think a lot about it. I purposely try not to think a lot about it because then I'm an analytical person and I overthink and then I fuck it all up. Right.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I love Jellyfish as much as I love Nine Inch Nails or, you know what I mean? Or Bauhaus or The Cure. And I certainly, and the Beatles, I certainly gravitate towards the kind of the emotional, element and complexity of like the darker stuff. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like these are pop song structures. There's nothing, I'm not reinventing the wheel. Like I'm just, it's the music I would want to hear, I think I'm trying to think the first two singles. So like Sick Fix, has kind of like that hooky chorus with the, that chant kind of vocal thing. And Fixation Fantasy, I don't know that there's anything pop about it other than the arrangement, right?
Yeah, because that's a very bleak and almost somewhere between My Bloody Valentine and like some sort of like Echo and the Bunnymen dream pop meditation.
Yeah, and for that one, I thought of it as a cross between My Bloody Valentine meets like I think you can definitely hear some Nails, Nine Inch Nails influence in there.
Yeah.
But crossed with I forget. Like a Gary Newman kind of element to it.
Yeah.
And Gary Newman is another one where
Genius.
an absolute genius, really hits the dark nail on the head. But they're pretty pop structured, you know. And then that's just the stuff I always kind of went for. And I think, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what came out. And with a song like Fixation Fantasy, like I said, I mean, it's bizarre. I didn't even realize how dissonant it was until my mix engineer, he had written me and he said, hey, I just want to make sure, like, you know, 'cause he's got I have a good ear, but he's got a phenomenal ear, you know?
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, I just want to, like, he kind of knew my work a little bit, but this was only the second song he worked on with me. And he had said, you know, like, can you send me like the chords that you're playing on this? And I said, yeah, I said, it is that dissonant, you know, like I realize that I even tried to rewrite the bass line I think it's the chorus part. And it just like, because I thought like, even I can feel the push and pull of that even was a little much for me initially. Cause I was like, you know, like you just kind of second guess yourself. And I was like, is this too out there? And I also have a bad habit of I'll write, like, let's say I write something on bass and then I will write a guitar part for it. And then I realize, okay, the guitar part's better. Let me let me scrap that bass line and do something new. Like, and I kind of do that a lot with a lot of these songs. So I had a moment where I thought, all right, did these just not go together anymore? And I tried a different bass line and it wasn't the song, you know, without it. But yeah, so when I actually started writing out the chords for him, and I'm not like classic, I'm not someone who knows really music theory, anything like that, but I know what a half step looks like on paper.
Yeah.
You know, I know when it's a C on top of a D, and then it's a C on top of a, you know, like a B flat or whatever it is. I could like just looking at what I had written out, I was like, these are all like half and whole steps. You know, and but that's what the song was. I had to run with it. It was great.
when you take that, which is not necessarily the mechanical, but the you know, the meat of the song, the more linear side of the song, and when you take it to something non-linear, like the emotions behind it, the lyrically very bleak. I mean, considering the subject matter, it is essentially about a really obsessive, stifling relationship. Correct?
Correct, yeah.
So kind of take me through that. What gave that impetus?
So for me, a song always starts with the music. You know, historically, I haven't really been the lyricist. I've never been the lead singer. I've always been like the backing vocalist, and like I did harmonies and whatnot. So I never had to worry about being a lyric writer. I mean, I wrote like here and there, but music was always the thing I really would hone in on. So for me, a song starts with, you know, music, and in this process, it's become easier. But when I first started Now After Nothing, I had to kind of go through a little bit of self-doubt with my lyrics, having not exercised that muscle for so long.
Yeah.
You know, so I probably procrastinated on doing the lyrics for these songs. But to get to your question, so the intensity and the dissonance and the kind of the emotional feel of the music itself is totally what drove the lyrics for that.
Yeah.
What tends to happen for me, well, with Fixation Fantasy, with a lot of songs, but I'll just be kind of like, you know, singing along with some gibberish words just to try to come up with a melody line, because I'll do the melody line before I'll even do the lyrics. Like I really, you know, that's just how I work.
I think a lot of us do that, believe it or not. I certainly do.
Okay.
I sing it before I write it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, like you hear there's people who are like, oh no, I had the lyrics first thing. And like that to me is just not, it's so, out of step with how I, like everybody's got their thing and that's cool. But yeah, so anyway, so as I'm kind of listening back to the music of it and just kind of humming along and whatever, and somehow the words Fixation Fantasy came out of my mouth. Like, I don't know where it came from. Like a lot of times I'll be in the car and like, if I, like I'll sing like, like the street signs or whatever, just as I'm, whatever, but I have no idea where it hit me from, but that was like the first line of the song was Fixation Fantasy.
Yeah.
And, it seemed to thematically fit so well with the kind of emotional content of the music, that I, instantly I had a storyline behind it, as soon as I kind of put the two together. And then from there, it was actually kind of easy because we've all had kind of, we've all had those relationships, I think, that, you don't realize they're toxic at the time, or even worse, you kind of do know they're toxic at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't, it's like a car crash. Like, it's, not great, but you can't look away. Like, yeah, it's like that ultimate, and there's even another line in there about like temptation, prodigy. And, it's kind of taking yourself as far down the path is, you should not thinking that you can, thinking you have it in you to not cross the line, and only to find out that you crossed the line however many steps ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was able to draw on a lot of those experiences from, past relationships and things like that. And really not just myself, fortunately, but, but even like friends and their, toxic relationships that they've been in and things like that. So I think that's just like where the lyrics came from.
So before, doing this, you mentioned that you were always the backing guy. What type of music were you creating? What type of bands were you playing in precursor to this?
Bands that sounded just like Now After Nothing, basically, because I wrote all the music in, my main project that I had before this. I wrote all the music for it, and then I had a singer who did lyrics and melodies and whatnot. But musically, like, this is who I am, like this is the sound I've always had, basically. So I don't think I was doing anything all that different, other than, I kind of gave myself liberties to do a lot more with keyboards in this band, whereas in my previous band, I had a, phenomenal guitar player that really knew how to play the role of keyboards and guitars.
Mhm.
Like and this is a guy I worked with since, I was a kid back in South Florida, before I even moved to Atlanta. So having a guy like that in the band, I kind of was like, like people would come up to us and say, "Oh man, you guys are great. Like, you should get a keyboard player. You'll sound just like the Killers, or you'll sound just like the Cure." And I'm like, that's why I don't want a keyboard player. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I think with this project, I kind of was just like, like I don't give a fuck. I like, it's not that I never, it's not that I didn't like keyboards. I just didn't want to sound like whatever.
Yeah.
Or, come off as too derivative. But this time around, I think, and the way I approach keyboards and historically have approached it has always been, I mean, like I'm not a piano player. I'm just a guy who knows how to kind of find his way around an instrument. So I would, just kind of, I mean, I think if you listen to the keyboard parts in Now After Nothing, it's not, I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm just trying to do some stuff that sounds cool,
Oh, it's very ambient. You're not playing like keyboard runs, but they're ambient soundscapes that accompany the rest of the music, which is, I think, what also kind of sets it apart, because there is that sense of like ambient and trance music embedded in it, which is another layer that's to your advantage. You see like bands now in this era doing the post-punk thing and relying on keyboards. They're not as guitar driven as, you know, the post-punk of the past, as it were. And that's what I really dig about the keyboards in this project, because they are almost coming from a completely different mindset about how you approach the instrument.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. The rest of the EP, does it kind of fall in line? Although neither of these songs, they sound like you, but they are not the same song at all.
Yeah.
Sick Fix is it's almost more like a kind of Billy Idol in his post Generation X period, when he was starting to like get darker, like you're like some kind of like S&M disco.
No, God, that's a great description too. Yeah, I mean, Sick Fix, you know, S&M disco. I think you hit the nail on the head, actually.
Yeah.
And then whereas Fixation Fantasy, you know, is probably, I don't know if you would say polar opposite of it, but it's pretty different.
Well, it just expounds more on the darkness of Sick Fix. You know, it extracts like more of the kernel of what makes that bleak and draws it out into something completely different. That's why it still sounds like the same band, but not the same song. So as far as like the EP that's to come, does it fall in line with that sort of like dichotomy where like one's not going to quite sound like the other, and you know, you're going to kind of approach it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And all the songs are written and they're mostly all recorded. I'm really just kind of going back now and, you know, I'm adding in the final vocals, and I'm, you know, touching up a couple guitar parts here and there that, you know, I just wanted to tighten up or whatever. So everything's already written. I mean, and some of these demos, I've had demos for these songs for several years that I've been sitting on. And some of these songs actually were sparked from ideas that I mean, there's a song that I'm working on now called Holly, and it's this little kind of keyboard thing that I wrote, I mean, probably 15, 20 years ago, that I never knew what to do with. I never knew how to, you know, like, because I wasn't into keyboards at the time, and it was just kind of this little thing that I thought, you know, it's gonna be like an instrumental or something like that. And part of what I did for this project was actually started opening up all these old sessions of like, you know, little 30 like Sick Fix was a, you know, 23-second bass line and nothing else. That's all it was, just like that do 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 do. And like, why I would have even recorded it, you know what I mean? Like, other than I was like, oh, this is, you know, whatever. And then I never came, you know, just never did anything with it. And then fast forward, when I was starting this project, it was like, you know, it was kind of daunting to think about, because originally this was going to be like a solo album and all that kind of stuff. And I just saw it as that, and which I guess it kind of ended up being, but I have a fantastic drummer I worked with. But I, you know, just started opening up all these old sessions, and then lo and behold, like something would catch my ear, and I'd be like Sick Fix, like I heard that little bass line with no guitars, no nothing. It wasn't even, it was direct, not even amped or anything. Really like crappy sounding, you know, I might as well have recorded into a boombox. And, but by the end of I mean, but it just, something in that little bass line, I was like, man, it just, you know, something was there. And by the end of the day, I mean, I had, you know, demoed up, I had programmed some drums and had written all the guitar parts. I had reworked another section and added the keys. And, you know, and by the end of the day, I was like, oh, I really have like something I really like here. So with that being the case, you know, a lot of these were things that I've been sitting on and had written at very different points of time in my life. So yeah, some of them are completely different from both Sick Fix and Fixation Fantasy. Like Holly, the one that I was just talking about, is a good example. It doesn't really sound like either of those, but you know, kind of it's very keyboard oriented and does have like a actual melodic keyboard kind of run to it.
Yeah.
But it, you know, once you get past the long intro, because I seem to do a lot of long intros, once it, like the drums kick in and it gets moving, it's like there's like that instant kind of big washed out shoegazy guitar, and you're like, oh, that's the same guy.
Yeah.
Let's
So
see.
was this like something you were, the type of music you were listening to as like a young kid?
Yeah, I mean, you know, and again, like I listen to so much different stuff just for different reason, right? Like whether it was, you know, Bauhaus, Sisters of Mercy, The Cure, what, you know, everything on kind of like the darker side. But like I said, I mean, I love listening to, you know, like the production on Jellyfish's Spilt Milk.
Yeah.
Was just incredible, you know. And I was just so floored by just the massive scale that you know, just how full sounding that whole album was. It made me it changed the way I approached music and writing music, in that I wanted to, you know, I wanted to have a nice big full sound. I wanted to have those bits of ear candy. I wanted to keep it interesting, and if for no one else than for myself, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone else could hate it, but if it's you know, adding a little extra something that, you know, that I like, well, that's kind of all that matters. But yeah, like it really inspired me to really like not just half-ass it.
Yeah.
You know, really take the time to give it, you know, give every song that little extra something that it's going to, that will benefit the song.
Yeah, and staying in surface of the song, that's honestly the only like pure way to approach creating music. I think outside of that, once you start to, you know, over intellectualize it too much, it starts to become product.
Oh, and I went through that phase.
Yeah.
You know, like I absolutely went through that phase where, you know, it was my first band after I'd stopped being a drummer. It was my first band where I really started being like, you know, coming into my own as a songwriter. And I just had that phase where I thought I had to throw everything in the kitchen sink into a song, and I had to make it as weird as I could make it and as different as I could make it. And the songs sucked, as you know, like as much as I could have made them suck. You know, yeah, you know, obviously there's some hyperbole there, but
Sure.
but yeah, I mean, I definitely overdid it, and it didn't work. I didn't like it. There's a reason those songs never got really released. They just weren't, you know, they weren't there. They just didn't have the cohesion of what you get from a pop song structure.
Mm.
You know, so it was just, and it was just, I would hear it back, and it just felt too contrived, and that's not, you know, it's not the kind of music I wanted to make, and it's not the kind of music I want to listen to. So why would I make it?
Yeah.
And I think, oh shit, I had one more thought on that. Now I lost it. It'll come to me. You probably already figured out I talk forever. So.
No, that's why we're here.
Right.
And, you know, I did kind of want to like revisit one thing that I kind of touched on there, though. Like the stuff you listen to in your youth is kind of like, in my opinion anyway, what really informs your emotional growth. And it kind of like, you know, looking at, you know, a CD binder, or in my case, the cassettes and 45s and stuff that were like in my collection from back then. It's almost a roadmap of like my life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Be it like the old punk and hardcore stuff I was into, and thrash, all the way to like, you know, in 1988, 89, when Pretty Hate Machine came out and completely blew everything apart for me.
Yeah.
there were always, like, even going back to when I was a very, very small child, like listening to like Black Sabbath and T-Rex and Bowie and
Yeah.
the Stones and the Beatles, like that's kind of like the story of my youth through music. So I was kind of wondering, like, you as like maybe like a 12-year-old kid, what were you really into then?
Let's see, when I was 12, oh God, well, when I was 12, I was listening to like metal.
Hmm.
I mean, I was a metal kid for sure. But I found, when I found bands like Jane's Addiction and, like Smashing Pumpkins, and what those bands, it really made an impression on me, because all of a sudden I was like, there's some real substance here that's missing from this other crap, you
Yeah.
know? Um, so I mean, like, I listened to what I was exposed to, but I really like found what I was looking for when I found, more of the 90s alt kind of thing that was, I hate to say the word alternative, but that's what it was back then, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so that's like, yeah, I would say like that's what really informed me as a songwriter, or inspired me as a songwriter.
And Jane's Addiction, I think, in general, inspired multiple genres of music.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
There were, like, coming from the scene I'd come from, like hardcore and punk. After Ritual de la Habitual came out, it seemed like, even like they were already, Nothing Shocking was already a big thing even for the punks. But when that came out, hardcore bands started to form what is now known as post-hardcore,
Mm-hmm.
via bands like Quicksand and Fugazi before them, but they weren't really into like Jane's Addiction and stuff. But
Right.
Quicksand and Orange 9mm and all these bands coming out of New York, Into Another is another great example, that they were really like sloughing off the form
Mm-hmm.
of what we consider hardcore punk, and turning it into art. And it was Jane's Addiction that was kind of like that focal point for all of them. And
Yeah.
I've spoken to all of the people in these bands at one point or another, and it always comes down to that. There's something very uh, almost like subatomic about what Jane's Addiction brought to the table, that it gets under your skin and stays there, and just changes things.
Absolutely. I mean, that was exactly my experience. They were just doing something different's not even quite the right word, because it was like Nirvana was doing something different, and obviously Nirvana was Nirvana, right? But
Yeah.
Nirvana wasn't doing what Jane's was doing, in that it wasn't as there was a lot. There was, Jane's was an art rock band essentially.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's what was, up until that time in my life, like that's what I came to realize was missing, from everything I was listening to. So yeah, that they had a huge, impact on me for sure.
Well, it's what Perry Farrell said about his explanation of the sound of the band. It was in one of the home videos. Someone asked him, "Oh, what does Jane's Addiction sound like?" He said, "Well, Jane's Addiction is the perfect confluence between the Bad Brains and Led Zeppelin."
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, fuck, he's right. Like, what a great way to just put a fine point on it.
Yeah.
But going through your youth and taking what I'm guessing would have been hair metal, or were you more into like thrash and like the heavier?
I would probably more in the hair metal.
Yeah, that was the era, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, I was young enough that I didn't even have MTV or anything like that, so it was like what I heard on the radio.
yeah, yeah. I mean, because at that point, you're not really, most kids anyway, they're not seekers when it comes to the entertainment they consume. Not until puberty for most. And being a 12-year-old and finding these things, you start to explore different avenues. When does it come to a point where you're creating music, or wanting to create music?
Yeah, so I was, I got my first drum set when I was 12,
Mm,
and I thought I was going to be a drummer. Like I don't know what it was that, made me want to do it, but I just knew I really wanted to be a drummer. Maybe it was just the intensity of the instrument. What I came to really love, and I actually still love most about playing drums, is just the physicality of doing 4 different things at once, and just like the mental dexterity it takes to do it. I enjoy the physical experience of kind of doing it. But it really, when I think, like, hearing Eric Avery and hearing Simon Gallup, and kind of knowing, that bass and drums really lock in, but hearing those 2 guys, the way that they approached bass was just, to this day, I mean, those are probably my top 2, if not somewhere in my top 4 or 5 favorite bass players. There's a few other guys in there, Peter Hook.
I was just going to say,
yeah. But the way that those guys approached, the instrument, and there's something like just really sexy about the bass,
Yeah.
And hearing the way that those guys like were writing these just amazing riffs on bass,
Fascination Street, man. Fascination Street.
Completely. When you heard what they were writing, and you heard it, like, it wasn't coming from like these crunchy guitars. Like, it just was this really smooth, kick-ass, little bass lines. That's really what hit me. I was like I go to band practice, and anytime when we were in a break, I'd grab my bass player's bass and just start fucking around with it. In high school, there were so many drummers and so many guitar players that whenever we had our school talent shows, it was like, hey, one of you guitar players, you got to play bass on this song. And I was like, I'll do it. So that, I mean, I started kind of doing it, and then realized, I have more to offer than just being kind of the drummer. And I mean, I was like, my first band, I was 18 years old in a band with guys that were 25 and 26. And they, it was a very intimidating thing, right? Because I wasn't a songwriter, just being like the guy stuck behind the drums. But I also didn't have, I was intimidated by these older guys that were, what I saw as like, musicians that, knew their stuff, like were writing songs, whatever. And because I was younger than them, I think it was easy for them to kind of like, give me shit as being like, you're the kid drummer kind of thing,
Yeah.
But it was definitely around that time that I was like, I have something to say here, and I remember like when I bought that P bass back there, well before I ever thought of switching to drums, I just wanted something to write on. Like I knew I had songs in me. I didn't know what they were going to sound. I knew nothing about what they were going to be. But I knew I just needed to explore songwriting in that way. And funny enough, one of the first things I ever wrote was, I mean, if I listen back to it today, I mean, it sounds like me,
Yeah.
It was a cross between The Cure and Sonic Youth. And because this was like the first thing I ever wrote, it was a blatant ripoff of The Cure meets Sonic Youth. However, be that as it may, it was still, it was me coming out, And I think, yeah, that was it.
I think we all have to kind of go through that period too, where we're just not fully reproducing our idols, but certainly borrowing liberally from them.
Yeah.
Because you find your own voice through the voices of others. When a child is learning to speak, and I'm intimately familiar with this now, being an old dad of a young child who was born right before COVID. He was like a year and a half old when COVID hit. He wasn't speaking as quickly as he should have. And that has a lot to do with the fact that he was only hearing one or two voices, mom and dad. mom and
Mm-hmm.
dad.
Right.
When a
Right.
child speech development finds fruition when children are around multiple voices.
Mm-hmm.
These voices, it informs them. It helps them to find their own, intonation, different ways of pronouncing things, and that's where they build their own linguistic skills from. I think it's the same thing with music.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to sample all these different things and rip them off if you have to, just to
Right.
kind of get down to the meat of what it is that really moves you about music, and then you find your voice and you can utilize it with dexterity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And part of that process too is like we were just talking about before. It's like you kind of go through your period of like you're kind of over borrowing, and
Hmm.
then you go through your period of like like I'm throwing the kitchen sink at this because look what I can do. Like it takes time to be a songwriter, to be a good songwriter. And if you're someone who it doesn't take time, more power to you. Like you're one of the really lucky super talented people that do it, right?
Yeah.
But I am not one of those people, or else I'd be talking to you, in front of hundreds of thousands of people. Or,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like it took me till I was, till I had to go through all that. It didn't come naturally. I had to find my way to it.
I think a good deal of your voice in music comes from fear too. I think what terrifies you, what sets your teeth on edge, also has a great deal to do with what you create.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole impetus of this show, which I don't know how familiar you are, or if you even are familiar with this show. I only have one pre-prepared question. Uh, that question being, what is it that terrifies you on an existential level? The reason why I ask it is because honestly, what terrifies you is what informs who you are as a person. It's like the core of your being. Because
Yeah.
we're fear. All humans, all animals are fear driven. So I guess I at this point would posit that question to you.
Right. Oh, so what fears me the most on an
Yeah.
existential level?
Yeah.
God, that's a really good question. Um, hmm. I think it's not exactly fear of the unknown, but there's definitely some level of fear of not being in control.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't need to have total control, although some former bandmates would argue not, that's not the case, but but we're not speaking about band specific stuff right now. But yeah, I mean, I think like just being being helpless, I think, unable to take care of myself, take care of my family, that kind of thing. Not just but existentially, I'm not just talking financially and all that. Just these days, I think like I have a son, and I could not imagine. My biggest fear is not being there for him.
Yeah.
For him while he's growing up and all that kind of thing. So I think like any kind of sense of like where I wouldn't have control over being a part of his life or that kind of thing. I think that would probably be that's definitely something that does inspire some fear in me.
And honestly, like that's one of the top 3 answers I've gotten. It's that fear of loss of control, fear of not being there for those we love. I think that makes you normal. So
Right. Yeah.
I'm by no means a sociologist or a psychologist, but
yeah,
I think ultimately that speaks to you being a normal human being.
right. Well, and I do have a master's degree in mental health counseling, so I'm sort of a psychologist in a former life. So yeah, so I've with that background, I've come to know that, the more messed up you are, probably the more normal you are, actually, in all reality.
Yeah.
Because we are all screwed up on some level, and that's just, that's life.
And that's how people bond
Yeah.
too. Like like when you really bond with, like, say you just meet your significant other, or potential significant other, that point where you really glom together, you really bond.
Hmm.
It's over shared trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't get into all of the shared trauma that my wife and I have,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, there's certainly, I think you're absolutely right. What's funny too, from a psychological perspective, they talk about like opposites attract, and there's something very true about that, in that we find people that, kind of bring out those things in us. It's almost eerie, like the things that are sometimes the most difficult things for us to face are, that's what we try to find, like subconsciously, when we're, finding people to partner up with, throughout our lives. It's a sick game that that we play with ourselves, and but again, that's just part of life.
Yeah, but coming from your background, like, you have to have noticed also that there's just something inherently cruel about the human condition too, just on our parts. Um, even parts of myself, the parts of myself that I despise are the parts of myself that, somehow I find, a little bit of sick joy in the comeuppance of someone who I dislike. You know, and it's natural, it's normal, but it's also, like, it's sadistic in a strange way. I don't want
Y-
them to die because
right.
I just don't want that on my, I grew up Catholic. I don't want that on my conscience. But you know, th- I think there's just something inherently dark about the human condition too.
Yeah, 100%. I think what's even more interesting is the people who hide it the best, hide it the best. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like the people that don't. When you think about, like, anytime I've been in, and social media has really kind of brought this to the forefront, where you could be in a relationship with someone, and things maybe not going the best or whatever, and then you look on and you see all these other people, and they look like they're just happy and blah blah blah, and they're probably the most miserable ones.
Yeah.
It's like it's just like that whole keeping up with the Joneses mentality, and that's like a sick thing that we do to ourselves too, right? Like we torture ourselves with, um you know what we how our lives should be, instead of embracing how they are, or trying to make them better for, our lives better for who we are, and where we are at that time. um I mean, I have the benefit now of having, not well I have the benefit now of not being in my 20s anymore,
Yeah.
that and not knocking 20-year-olds, but it's just, it's just, with age comes experience, and a little bit more wisdom, that, and a little more self-assuredness, and a little more willingness to say, okay, I might not be right here, let me work on my issues, so.
Oh, I would argue that in my 40s are easily the most self-assured time of my life.
Mhm.
And they're almost over. I'm closer to 50 than 40. But my 20s, I knew I was lost. And
Mhm.
it wasn't fun. My
Yeah.
my teens, fuck my teens. My 20s were awful. My 30s, still not that great.
Yeah.
But once I got into the better, like the midpoint of my 40s, it seemed to me that I stopped caring about that, keeping up
Mhm.
with the Joneses, or if I only dressed like this, then this would happen, and if I only had this kind of job, then I'd have this kind of life. And I started realizing that the things that I'm seeing, and looking at these nice, shiny, sparkly people, they're not who I want to associate with if we were in the same
Yes.
vicinity.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lesson to be learned there, that all of these shiny, happy people, they're just a commercial. even if they're not paid for it. They're a commercial for a version of their own lives that they're not living.
One, and I was just, yeah, I'm so glad you added that at the end, because I was going to say, and that's the worst part of all, is like they're a commercial, to the outsider when their own story is not, nearly what it appears to be. 100% agree.
I think there's an element of that with, the content of your lyrics too. There's they're they're dark, but I think they're also
Yeah.
coming from a place of, you know, kind of looking back a little bit, not with disdain, but with an eye towards self-realization and
Hmm.
self-determination. Um, like we were talking about the lyrics before about there being like a sick relationship.
Hmm.
But it's not just talking about one side or the other. It's like, what's the old adage? There's your side, there's their side, and then there's the truth.
Absolutely. And I even, I was writing a blurb when I was releasing Fixation Fantasy, and what I had written at the end is, something along the line. I don't remember exactly what it was, but something along the lines of, I always saw this song as telling all three sides of the story,
Mm.
because lyrically and even in like the voice that I use and the difference between like the harmonies and the really dissonant harmonies against the background of the music in the verses, and then it's got that a single voice in the choruses and whatnot.
Hmm.
Those are very purposely how they are, because I saw it as there being like two different sides of this story, but it's I also dip into the kind of like there's a third voice in that song that's a little more kind of the outsider looking in, and more commonly known as the truth.
The truth, yeah. And I think that's kind of an important, standpoint lyrically for that specific subject matter,
Hmm.
because for every person who's in a toxic relationship who's like, I got to get out of this, but they won't, they're almost as much at fault because they won't get out. And
Hmm.
I'm intimately familiar with that. Not so much in my own relationships, maybe once or twice, but just in relationships that I was forced to kind of be in the orbit of as a child, and witnessing it and thinking to myself as like a 7-year-old, and I shouldn't have had the wherewithal or the foresight to, think of something like this. But I was like, wow, you're just as bad because you're dealing with it and putting other people through it.
Right.
And that's, I think, almost the same sin.
Hmm.
And that's I think the reason for the adage.
Right.
you know?
Right. And and on the one hand, I wholeheartedly agree, and on the other hand, I also see kind of the you know the it's easier said than done
Oh,
side of that story as well.
as do I. As
Yeah,
do I.
yeah, yeah. So and that's where like I when I was in my master's program and I was working with I'd done a lot of work with preteens, like counseling them and whatnot. And when you're in that situation, you realize that some of these poor kids never had a chance because of the complete toxicity that they were raised in. And unfortunately, these kids become adults and they enter into their own relationships. And for, whether they are, more of a victimizer or a victim, either way, like as a victim, you can't necessarily fault them when you look at the way, the experience that they had. And yeah, it's pretty messed up stuff.
Well, and the thing is too, I think when people like that, like myself, emerge from, their youth and go out into the world, they think to themselves, well, I'm going to be the one to break the cycle. And the sad truth of that is you don't really have the tools to break a cycle until
Absolutely.
you grow much older and experience the world and make a ton of mistakes and watch things slip through your fingers, fall apart, and get dark
Yeah.
and dirty. That's what that's what music like this is for. Music like this is for people like that, for people who, you know, kind of have a more intimate grasp on you know, the darker aspects of life. Do I think your music would appeal to the average Lady Gaga fan? Maybe, maybe. She tends to get dark too, but more often than not, I think your music's going to appeal to someone a little more familiar with damage.
Yeah,
Little
and
smut on their nose, you know?
right, yeah. And you know, like, and those of us who, you know, who get into this kind of music, and by get into it, I not like as necessarily writers or performers, but just like, you know, enjoy this type of music. I think for a lot of us, it's like, you know, especially when you're a lot younger, like, you know, you don't have access to therapy, and you don't have, like, you know, like, this is how we cope, you know, like I remember as a, you know, putting a song on repeat on, you know, laying down on my bed and just, you know, like, just letting the music kind of heal me, giving me that the best catharsis that it could have given me at that time.
Yeah.
And because, you know, that's music, that's what it does for you. And I certainly, you know, at 17, 18 years old, I didn't have I couldn't have even imagined, like, even what my issues were enough to go seek help for them. You know, like, I knew I was, you know, I don't even know if I would have well, I can remember thinking, like, yes, like, I am probably a depressed person.
Yeah.
But not knowing how to even ask for help at that time. You know, and I wasn't like, you know, so I wasn't like, you know, depressed to a point where I was like, you know, wasn't able to function. I mean, I was more like dysthymic, you know, just kind of like this overarching melancholy.
Yeah.
Which, you know, it's not uncommon. But I certainly didn't have any of the knowledge or the tools at such a young age to even think about how I would begin to help myself. And you know, a lot of that just comes from, you just got to kind of go through it, and eventually hopefully you find your way out of it.
Yeah. But
you know, or find a way to manage it.
And that's 9 times out of 10. I don't know if anyone's cured of melancholy or depression. I think you just learn to recognize, like, oh, okay, I know you.
Right.
I know you. That's the, you know, the dark wolf, the shadow self, the Jungian shadow self. You start to recognize it, and, you know, you can compartmentalize it. You can't push it all the way away from you,
Mm-hmm.
but even in the depths of your depression, especially as you get older and you see mental health professionals, you start to learn that, yeah, this is just something that happens. It's like a cold,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just gonna ride it out and do my best to,
Right.
you know, not let it make me want to dive off a cliff or something.
Right.
But as a kid, you don't have all that knowledge, so you just go home and you listen to Mayonnaise off of Siamese Dream 20 times.
Yep.
You know, and then there is a healing even to, like, wallowing in it to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what musicians do. I think that's what we all kind of do. We ruminate until we make something else out of it, and that is our, you know, way to recognize the beast and compartmentalize it.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, like, being like, this isn't necessarily my forethought on it now, but I remember as a kid thinking, like, or as a young songwriter thinking, I want to write songs that, you know, make people understand, like, you know, I want them to feel like they're being heard, like they're being understood. And that's not to say that I don't still want to do that, but I think it was more of a driver at that point in time. Whereas now it's more about, like, you know, I do this more for me. I write, you know what I mean? Like, just as a way to express myself with a lot less thought as to, because I mean, like, you know, I'm not naive. Like, I could only have 100 people hear, you know, like, hear these songs from now until the end of time.
Right.
Like I don't expect, I just don't expect to reach the masses, or even a meh. So, so I mean, at this point, it's like, this is just what I do because I need to do it for me. But that was a very conscious, like, mindset I had, like I remember getting out of, I wanted to give back to music what I had gotten from music. Like that's exactly what what my kind of mission was.
Yeah, but I remember being in my first band when I was 13 and saying to the rest of the guys in the band, if these lyrics that I write reach one person, I will feel vindicated. And I probably, in all of my youthful sincerity, I probably believed that in the moment I said it. But
Yeah.
in all sincerity, you want everyone to hear it.
Right. Yeah.
At that time, you get older and you realize, maybe this isn't going to, I'm not going to be a rock star, or I'm not going to be the biggest band on the Eastern Seaboard, or whatever. But I do know that this is what makes me happy, and this is what makes me feel seen. And that's the even bigger part.
Yeah.
I feel seen via this. Doesn't matter who sees me, but this is an honest and complete reflection of how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
That's very important. That's very, that's all important. I think that's a connection with the divine.
Yeah, it's being, it's feeling seen or feeling heard. It's kind of, like if a tree falls in the woods and there, like that whole kind of thing, right? Like it's all good to cut down the tree. Well, I'm a tree hugger, so no, but but if the tree falls down, or if I do it, whatever, wherever I'm going with this horrible metaphor, like there's definitely some, like, it would be silly of me to say, well, I'm only doing this for myself, because if that were the case, I mean, obviously there's, a little bit, that's a little bit of hyperbole in that too, because there's a reason I'm on your podcast. There's a reason I post songs to YouTube, whatever. Because, this is my art, and, like I would like to, but the difference now, and to your point, is, I don't want everybody to hear it. I just want the people who are going to enjoy it to have the opportunity to hear it. Yeah. Because that's kind of the, if somebody can get something out of it, awesome. I want to reach that person. That's kind of like, that to me is cool. The same way that I found the artists that I love, no matter how well known or no matter how obscure, the band that released one 6-song EP on, the tiny little label, wherever, I got something out of hearing that music, and that to me meant something.
Yeah. When thinking about, like the whole, tree falling in the woods, Schrodinger's cat type of situation, I'm kind of viewing, what's to come with the EP in that sense. Like, what are the echoes of it? Like, I know we touched upon this, and we touched upon one song, but if you were to kind of sum up what the EP kind of entails lyrically, musically, how would you sum that up for me?
Oh, good question. I got to think now on the songs that are going to be on it. Actually, I'm lucky. I have a list right here. So I mentioned the one song, Holly.
Holly, yeah.
Holly is a little fictional story, that's probably not actually, fictional to me, but all too true for many people out there. It's the kind of the quote unquote perfect person, like she has her life together. It's like really not like exactly what we were just talking about, right? You put your best foot forward, or your best fake foot forward, as the case may be. Your best photographs on Instagram with all the, filters and all that crap. And people envy you, but in reality, you are you're a mess, and you're a mess, and you are struggling to with all you have to to keep that facade happening. So that's kind of the lyrical story around Holly. There's another song called Criminal Feature that is very rooted in the enmeshment of politics and religion, and the horrible enmeshment of politics and religion. There's supposed to be a separation of church and state clause in there somewhere, and I think that
it doesn't exist. We're in a Christian ethno state almost. In this country.
So Criminal Feature is very much kind of about that, and the danger of it. The false prophets and all that kind of thing that
Trump.
come with thank you. It's like I always try to avoid talking about politics.
Fuck that guy.
but fuck exactly, fuck that guy. I just can't stand I can't stand all just the hypocrisy and all that stuff. So Criminal Feature is very much about that. There is another song called Dare, which is Dare is it's a little more open to interpretation, but it's kind of like it's a little bit of like that fear of being out of control in yourself, like knowing being in a severe temptation, and knowing that you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, but you just kind of can't help yourself. Very much like how Fixation Fantasy was that the tale of you're in too deep, but you don't know how to get out. So Dare has a similar theme, but from a kind of like a different angle. But thematically it's similar. Same theme, different storyline, I guess I should say. Different characters.
Yeah.
There's another one called Entangled. It might be Entangled or Entangle Me. I haven't decided yet, but that's another kind of codependency, twisted relationship kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about that one. Because it's quite similar to some of the other ones, but hearing myself talk about some of these, I'm like, I don't have that many bad relationships. It makes it sound like I'm like I'm a happily married guy at this point, but yeah, I guess human relationships in general, and these aren't always romantic relationships.
Right.
I've always, and this is probably what drew me into the field of of counseling and whatnot, is relationships aren't, and I've said this before in talking about one of the other songs. The relationships aren't always with another person. Sometimes they're just relationships we have ourselves with ourselves, with our history, with that kind of thing. Relationships, it's there's I'm totally gonna blank now. I'm not a practicing counselor at this point, but
yeah.
So I'm not as brushed up on my my the different theoretical schools out there, but there's I think it's Eric Byrne, actually. He had his theory was basically like transactional analysis, and it's basically everything is a transaction with you and this other thing, and he thinks of you think of everything as a transaction. So I've always been very fascinated by the psychology of how we talk to other people, relate to other people, and the internal struggles we have with ourselves. Like that to me is all relationships.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of my lyrical content comes from.
I mean, I kind of, once you mentioned that you had a background in counseling, it brought things into kind of like a stark perspective for me in relation to your lyrics, because it doesn't necessarily have to have happened to you. You were exposed to enough of these sorts of extremities in human condition to have fodder for lyrics. And it's all relevant, and you can write 15 songs about negative relationships or toxic relationships, and that's life. They could be all completely different songs with completely different sets of lyrics. Anything can be a toxic relationship.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
I had a toxic relationship with narcotics. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, exactly. And like that illustrates my point, right? Is like it's not just our relationships with other people, it's our relationship with social media, it's our relationship, like that. Talk about fucking toxic, right?
Oh, Jesus, yes.
I mean, as a society, our relationship with social media is a fucking train wreck. That's like a perfect example, narcotics, social media, the media in general, politics, religion, all of that shit.
Yeah. And these things are meant to narcotics not, but social media and the internet in general was initially meant to inform and democratize us. Government and politics that's supposed to serve us, on a civic platform. Religion is supposed to serve us spiritually. They have all been, as is the way with humans, twisted into means by which to control us.
Absolutely.
And I think that type of repression and tyranny, I think that's stirring up some very interesting things with the generation that's behind. You're a generation behind me, I believe, right? You're in your 30s.
We can say that. It may or may not be true.
Well, I'm a Gen Xer.
Yeah.
If you're a Gen Xer, then I see you. But if not, if you're a little bit younger or whatever, the generation that's behind you, I'm talking about their kids. I'm talking about the millennials and younger. They are, some of with a little swing. It seems to me like they're meeting these challenges with a greater sense of empathy than I would have given them credit for before having started this podcast. Meaning that I've had so much interaction with them via this, that it seems to me that they're the ones who are embracing the pronouns of trans people and utilizing them correctly, and having open discussions with people from the LGBTQ plus community, and navigating that with aplomb. And it's the way they handle themselves with social causes. I think they're delivering on the promise of what the Gen Xers, what we were trying to do, see a more, I don't even want to call it politically correct, a more empathetic,
right,
and a more soulful society. I think when they take over is going to be the time when things start to really become good again, because I think my generation dropped the ball. I think just like the hippies, once the hippies became the man, adults,
right,
they had cashed in a majority of their belief systems and just became a part of the machine. My generation did the same damn thing. And it sucks. It's horrible to witness, because I never let those ideals go. They are so part and parcel to my being that I couldn't possibly let them go. But these young ones, I have so much faith in them, in that and in their taste in music, because post-punk became very popular again, and darkwave and goth and all of the subsets of punk and post-punk, just they're becoming popular again.
Mm-hmm.
I think these kids have it right. I think they have it all over what I was when I was that age.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting too is like I agree with what you said 100%. My son's probably a little bit older than yours, it sounds like, but he we were watching I forget which show we were, like one of the Marvel shows, or sorry, one of the DC shows together. He'd kill me if I didn't get it right. And there was a gay character. I wish I could remember what show, but anyway, one of the superhero shows, and there was a gay character, and they introduced it by like having, you know, the character show up with you know, I can't remember if the character had been there for a while or whatever, but they somehow revealed like, oh, okay, he has a husband. And my kid, who was you know, this wasn't that long ago, he's probably like, you know, 8, 9 years old at the time. He said, oh, cool, he's gay. That's cool. I support LGBTQ rights. And like, you know, like I was like, I didn't even know he knew what that was yet. You know what I mean? So to hear like him say that, and to have the awareness, and we're, you know, I mean, I live in Atlanta, in a pretty liberal, you know, part of town even. So I wasn't surprised, you know, that there were those conversations happening. And to what degree, you know, I mean, like it's conceptually, I know that those conversations were had, you know, like when it was like it was Pride Week. Well, what is Pride? You know, LGBT, you know, like they went into the whole thing. So I was, you know, like to hear him say that, to be aware of it, and for it to have no stigma, to feel so like, you know, just to be able to say like, oh yeah, I support their rights. At 8 years old, like that gave, I mean, like it warmed my heart, you know, because I was like, and I know that's not the experience for a lot of other, you know, 8 or 9 year olds out there.
Yeah.
And I grew up in South Florida, and don't get me, I grew up in Broward County, which is probably the last remaining, you know, yeah, you know, like Broward County is still at least Broward County, within the rest of Florida, it seems at this point. But you know, where I know those conversations, not only are they not being had, but they're being had, you know, in a negative way. You know, like it's so disheartening when something as simple as civil rights get attacked for really no damn good reason. You know, when people are you know, persecuted and you know, prejudged for, you know, who they are and all that shit. I know that those conversations still happen. You know, so while the pendulum is certainly, you know, far to the left, no pun intended, for, you know, in my case, I know that the pendulum swings the other way. And back to what we were saying about social media, you know, just like you said, like it's, you know, the thing that was, you know, the idea, the concept behind it was to bring people together, to share ideas, and to see how like so many things before it completely get misused and abused and misconstrued and just spun around in every which way that is completely antithetical to what it's supposed to be. You know, that's where you know, it can certainly be a little disheartening, and I just hope that, you know, I hope that there's enough in, you know, this new generation that are, you know, you know, your kid up, you know, as he or she gets older, my son as he gets older, you know, I hope there's enough of that open-mindedness, you know, like who do what you want, like what you want to like, don't like what you know, whatever, but just fucking treat people with respect. You know, like that's all I've ever, you know, expected from anyone. Just don't be a fuck. Don't be a douche. Yeah, don't be a douche. Exactly.
And having grown up in the quote unquote liberal north in Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, Scranton area to be exact, it was my experience growing up that we were mostly all voting Democrat, and all of our dads were in unions, and we listened to hip hop, and we thought we were culturally, forward thinking. But then, when you find out in the early 90s that someone in your high school is gay, those same people who were along with you, supposedly left-leaning Democrats, are now using the other F word very liberally and very openly in front of said person who I happen to be in drama club with.
Hmm.
And that it just it reverberated through my life in a very direct way, having one of my younger brothers being gay, and I'd known it since he was like 4,
Yeah.
you know, and I was very protective of him, as I had been with all 5 of my younger siblings, like steadfastly protective. But I just I see how hu- even human beings that think they're well intended can be so turned around by otherness. and
Yeah.
and, and you know my daughter's 22, she's almost done with school. My son's just turned 4, and I've been with his mother for 10 years. We've been married for like 5, and we live in what's supposedly the liberal north, right? I mean, Obama was president when we got together. Life was great, and my wife's a person of color, so we have a mixed race son, and we walk the streets around our home. We only have one neighbor or two that will even like talk to us. Everyone else kind of like leers at us. And I don't know if this is fully the truth, but I kind of felt like a light switch go off
Hmm.
when Trump got elected,
Yeah.
because before he got elected, and we'd be around the neighborhood, it was all smiles and waves.
Right.
And then this fucking pseudo fascist starts to run for president, and everyone becomes a fascist as well. They fall in line. And these are all probably supposedly well intended former Democrats, just like the
Yeah.
people I'd gone to high school with. I think when given the opportunity, those who are slightly more weak minded than myself will turn on the other in the drop
Hmm.
at the drop of a hat. And that's the reason why in the 80s people listened to Poison and Motley Crue instead of The Cure and Joy
Right.
Division. You know what I mean? Like, because they're just going to buy what they're being sold. And
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, I think even with my own band, those are not the people I want listening to my music.
Yeah.
The sad part of that is that's almost 60% of the population at this point.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's God, there's so many layers of that onion.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to like not really, you know, like, as much as I love to talk about politics and whatnot, like it's a rabbit hole that
Oh yeah.
I can get very impassioned about. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to what you said. Absolutely. A lot of truth to it. I think, like people are the way they are, right? And I think, like when Trump came into office, it's, these people didn't suddenly appear. I mean, they were always there. They just felt a little more emboldened, a little more empowered,
Mhm.
to kind of, shout it from the streets or whatever. I don't know. Like I try to play devil's advocate, and I try to really be open-minded and think, you know, like get my head into the mindset of like, well, if I am that person, like, why do I think this way? Like what experience? And like, I'm in Atlanta. Like
Yeah.
Atlanta, like as purple as it's be started to become, it's really, as purple as Georgia has started to become, like when I moved here, I likened Atlanta to Berlin. It, you know, smack dab in the middle of East Germany. It was, you know, just this whole other country, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there's, you know, there's still a lot to that. But anytime, like if I take a, you know, a trip to the Georgia mountains to get away or whatever, you drive through these, you know, more rural areas, and you know, I certainly don't condone the message, but I can see how if you're not exposed to, you know, two things. If you're not exposed to these, you know, like the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not exposed to it, to have your own firsthand experience of it, that's A. And B, you're being sold a narrative that, you know, this is against, you know, this is against God, this is against country, whatever, whether it be because, you know, like two guys can't like have sex, like, you know, where the fuck did I, you know, I'm not a big Bible reader, so I don't know if that's specifically in the Bible or not. But
biblically, there are two examples, and they're very thin, and they don't really have to do with homosexuality at all.
right, and I also know that the Bible says, you know, stuff about not eating, you know, eating pork, or, you know,
Yeah, you're supposed to keep kosher. If you're a Christian, you're supposed to keep kosher.
yeah. So, you know, so that argument to me is out the window, right?
Yep.
Like, you know, whatever. Like, I don't know. Like, who gives a fuck? You know what I mean? Like, why do you have to give a fuck what anyone else does in their business? And that's the part that just drives me nuts. So, like I said, like I see the perspective of, you don't have firsthand exposure to someone who's gay, someone of color, someone, you know, whatever. And then you're on top of it, you're being sold this narrative that apparently this is against God, or this is, you know, like these people are taking up all our tax dollars. So it's, you know, whatever. So that's, you know, putting you in the poorhouse. I mean, it's this false narrative. So I get it from that perspective. I'm not, you know, I'm not happy about it, but I understand the process in which that has become a reality for these people.
Mm-hmm.
And I really try to, you know, keep an open mind myself about, like, okay, well, I know that I can't possibly be right on everything either. Like, I'm sure there's something, you know, and there's plenty of things that don't work about, like, you know, like you can't go too far in either direction, because we know that just doesn't work. So, but I think it all comes down to, you know, I like me personally, I try to have a live and let live philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give you know, like it's in like in kink circles, there's like the whole concept of safe, sane, and consensual, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Like, I don't give a fuck what you do, just as long as you're being safe with yourself, and more importantly with, you know, people around you. You're doing, you know, you're acting in a manner that's sane. And a lot of that goes back to the safety thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're interacting with people in a consensual manner, you know, then all's good, you know, as long as you're just not being a fucking douche and fucking up, you know, other people's lives. You know, do what you want to do, be who you want to be, and don't fucking persecute anyone for being who they are. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, and the key components here are really people who feel threatened by, especially people in the LGBTQ community, in my opinion, have something very, very big to hide about their own sexuality. A. And B, I don't think it really has that much to do with politics. I don't even think it has to do with Donald Trump, even though he's a piece of shit. I think what it has to do with is the 24-hour news cycle and social media that we spoke of before. It's the rhetoric, it's the propaganda.
Right. Yeah.
Because take someone who's like just wholeheartedly disgusting, like Kid Rock, who just recently was shooting up a bunch of 12 packs of Bud Light because Bud Light had
trans woman as Woman
Yeah.
of the Year. Whereas if you look at, and there are pictures to prove it, many years before when Kid Rock was at the height of his fame, he was pictured in a club
I saw that.
with a drag queen.
Yeah.
Right? So you didn't change your mind. You were cool then, so everything was cool then. Now you're aping an image that's popular to the people who would listen
Who
to
would
you
buy into
anyway,
it.
who would buy
Yeah.
into your shit and listen to your music anyway, and you're pandering to them.
Yeah.
It's showmanship. I think a majority of these people are doing it because in their minds they're A, being contrarian and edgy, and B, have something to hide.
Right. Well, and right, there's the people who buy it and there's the people who sell it.
Yeah.
You know, take what just happened, you know, with the whole the Dominion lawsuit against Fox News.
Yeah.
All of what we did see, you know, that came out in the text messages and whatnot. The people that were selling it, they didn't believe it.
Oh.
But they, you know, they had a product to sell. They had salaries to make and bonuses, and they pandered to an audience that was buying it. I mean, the bitch of that is that, you know, it's under this guise of news. It's not, you know, under this guise of journalism.
Yeah.
But going back to, yeah, I mean, I don't know if all these people have something to hide as much as they, you know, some of them, you know, do, and some of them just have a fear that there's something to hide.
Yeah.
They're just, you know, like fucking confront it and like I mean, like let's kind of throw it on the table, right? Like there's probably some people that think, oh my God, like if I read this book, I'm going to be gay. If I watch this movie, I'm going to turn gay. And
Yep.
like, you know, if that's not how it works, you know, like, and you know what, like if you think you might be gay, fucking figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
like, and I don't mean that in a shitty way. I mean it like,
No.
like you'll be a happier person if you take the, you know, the initiative to figure it out. And a lot of times you'll probably find out like you know, no, I'm actually not. I just happen to like a rom-com.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
and I'm being silly about it, but you know what I mean? Like, just, I don't know. People would be so much happier if they would just kind of deal with the things that are going on. Like you said before, all of this, so much of this comes out of fear, and it's really a fear of like what's within us, right? Like, you know, you as the individual, you're afraid of what this thing is, whether it's, you know, sexuality, whether it's, you know, something, you know, you have a fear of like, you know, minorities or whatever, and taking jobs and all this crap that they've been selling us for however long. Just, I don't know. I wish more people would just educate themselves, you know, a little, properly educate themselves and not just, you know, get spoon-fed what they're being spoon-fed.
And I think it fully relates to music in the same way too, because it seems to me that the people who would take the route of being neo-fascistic are probably not going to be listening to cool music because they're not insightful, they're not in touch with their feelings, and they're not going to be moved by something as, in their minds, probably just minuscule as a song. But those of us who find, you know, absolute utter resplendence in the experience of listening to music, we're probably open-minded, we're probably very socially left-leaning, and we're probably very happy with, you know, the people in our lives who are reflections of something other than us.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably not a fully accurate statement, but it's been my experience.
I was going to say, yeah, that's certainly been my experience as well. You know, happily so. I can't think of, I don't know. I mean, I can't think of, out of any show I've ever been to, any show my entire life, whether it was like a hardcore band, whether it was, the most, um, sappiest of goth bands or whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, the only time I can remember like there being some sort of, anti-message, it wasn't from, it wasn't coming from like like the goth, dark wave, new wave, post-punk scene. So
No, honestly, sadly, it was probably at a hardcore show. You see some Nazis show up because they were attracted to the angst of the sound, not the content of the message. And having grown up here, we had a serious Nazi skinhead problem in the late 80s and early 90s. But, they weren't there for the music, for the message of the music. They were just there to get their rocks off and get in a mosh pit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean. And that's like kind of the sad thing, right? Is like, I think the message of the artist was often lost, and it was more about like just the testosterone driven angst and getting into the mosh pit and just fuck shit up,
Well, the Dead Kennedy said it in Nazi Punks Fuck Off. You can't be, how does it go? You can't be a punk if a jock lives in your head or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're not really here for the right reasons, so don't be here at all.
Yes, exactly. And I don't know, like I always reach a point in these kinds of conversations where I kind of just, I throw my hands up and I just have this thing of like, this is going to sound completely snobbish, but I'm going to say it anyway. I mean, the average IQ is 100, which means that, there's a fair amount of people above and a fair amount of people below. And that's just what it is, right? Not everyone is a critical thinker. Not everyone has, and I'm not saying that anyone who disagrees with me is that's not at all what I'm saying. There's, far better critical thinkers that, believe differently from me, and that's cool. Like, I got no problem with that. But it's the people that don't take don't take an initiative to be a critical thinker to the best of their ability.
Yeah.
That's what to me just is kind of uncool, because that's where you get ignorance. That's where you get, ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, and all that. Whatever the whole Jedi path of that.
Whatever Yoda said. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I guess to kind of like put a fine point on everything and sort of wrap up, there's something very intrinsically beautiful about what you do musically that, as I'd said, borrows from sounds of the past, but you use it to your own ends and make it your own. What does the future hold for you right now with this project? Are you planning on playing out, making a full length, trying to make a go of this, or is this just kind of just your side thing?
No, I mean, I want to, I'm a musician. I'm an artist. Like, I can't not make music. I didn't make music for a while before this, and it sucked.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I'm back and doing this again. So I definitely want to continue to, release as much new music as I can, as I can. I love playing out, and I, can't wait to do that with this band, as soon as possible. I'm still solidifying the live lineup, because I really did approach this as initially my approach to this was, like this idea of a solo album, and I played all the instruments and, was planning to play all the instruments and handle all the vocals and whatnot. And as I got further down the path, well, two things happened. One, I realized I do not have the same drum chops that I used to. So I definitely, you know, I wanted to get my drummer Michael involved. You know, and he's also a, you know, I enjoy doing, you know, all the writing and stuff by myself, but I also like collaborating with someone and, you know, that kind of thing. It's just kind of fun. Like I said, like when he and I were doing drum, dialing in drum sounds, like would have been a lot less, you know, fun to geek out by myself on drum sounds.
It's just more fun being in a band.
Yeah, yeah. So, so while like I will always be the musical kind of spark for Now After Nothing, it'll always kind of be my project because that's how I, you know, that's like this is who I am and it's what I want to do and present to the world, right? But I definitely want to get a live band together and play out because I miss playing shows. It was, you know, I love doing it when I did it. So I'll, but I'm also, it's funny because I'm also at a point where, you know, like I've been in plenty of bands. I've paid my dues and I can't just, I'm not going to go play a Wednesday night at, you know, 1 a.m. for 3 people. Like it just doesn't make any sense to me at this point. So I'm working on kind of putting together my own shows, which, you know, take a little longer to do, but that's okay. Right. Like I want to do it. You know, like I've done this for a long time and I want to do things the way that makes sense and that, you know, that I know I can do if I just put a little more effort into it. That's the other good thing about not, you know, necessarily being in a band with other kind of co-equal people is I don't have to deal with that, you know, like the conflict of the one guy who wants to play out every other week. And then you've got no one coming to your shows because you play every other week, right? But you know, everybody's got an opinion, and if they don't, you know, like if you can't find common ground, then it's just, you know, someone's always got to sacrifice somewhere. And you know, like I just want to do things the way I want to do it now. Like I don't want to play every single week. That's just not, you know, what I want to do. I'd rather spend my time being creative in the studio than playing show after show after show. Like that to me will come once the EP is done. You know, then there will be time to do shows, but I don't want to, you know, like I've been in past bands where, you know, when you can't get on the same, you can't get on like the same page as far as like the timeline of things. You end up, you know, like everything moves so much slower because you just keep, you don't stay focused on what you need to focus on, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just keep releasing music and start playing out. I hope to, you know, like maybe I'm working on some stuff right now. I'm thinking end of summer, early fall. Realistically, will probably be, you know, the first kind of like we may do some stuff if we like before then, some live stuff, but the first like real thing I want to do, I'm in the process of booking now. And that'll probably be like, you know, later this year.
So we can expect to get to see you at some point in the future then.
100%.
Excellent.
Yeah.
News.
And what would be really great is, you know, like I said, if I like focus on the EP now and then once I start playing, I'd love to start really playing next year. As much as I would love to do it all today and have it all ready, it's just, you know, it's not. And I, you know, I don't want to, that's the other thing. Like I'm at a point now, I don't want to do anything half-assed.
Yeah.
I don't want to go out there until like, you know, like it's fucking where I know it can be. So yeah, man, good to talk with you, Peter.
Likewise. Good to meet you.
Man. Take care. You too.
Night.
Later.
And there you have it. My conversation with Matt Spatial of Now After Never. I hope you dug it. It was just shy of 2 hours. I've been whittling down these episodes. I've been making them a little bit shorter, a little bit more digestible.
bite-sized, if you will. 2 hours shouldn't be considered a bite-sized podcast episode, I guess, but, you know, I like to stay a little epic in scope. I hope you go out and you listen to these 2 tracks. They are streaming everywhere. They are well worth your time. They are many-splendored. They don't adhere to just one sound, which is what makes it so much fun. From all of us at 3:33 a.m. Studios, he's been Matt. I've been Peter. You've been beautiful. And this has been the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. Until next time, try to enjoy the daylight. Have a good night, everybody.